Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here this evening. I am thrilled to welcome you to the Susan T. Marx Distinguished Lecture this evening with Elizabeth Turk. My name is Annalee Zimmerman. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Curatorial Affairs here at the Arthur Ross Gallery. We are so fortunate to have Elizabeth Turk with us tonight, who will be joined in conversation by Dr. Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw, the inaugural faculty director of the Arthur Ross Gallery. We're enormously grateful to Susan T. Marx, who has endowed this outstanding lecture series for the Arthur Ross Gallery, now in its 9th year. Through this incredible lecture series, the Arthur Ross Gallery has hosted such luminaries as Alison Saar, Sharon Nishat, William Kenkridge, Liliana Porter, as well as Jome Plensa, Curly Holton, and David C. Driscoll, whose fantastic exhibition, David C. Driscoll and Friends, just departed this venue for the rest of its international or national tour. Through her broad support and years of advocacy, Susan T. Marx has done much to advance the arts at Penn. Susan T. Marx is a lawyer, an artist, a nonprofit leader, a Penn alumni leader who is active with her class reunion committee, serves on Penn Museum's Directors Council, the Trustees Council for Penn Women, the Arthur Ross Gallery Alumni Advisory Board, and who served as president of the Penn Club of New York from 2012 to 2018, amongst many, many other activities. In 2008, Marx received the Alumni Award of Merit from the University of Pennsylvania for her outstanding service, the highest honor bestowed upon a Penn alumni. I would now like to welcome Susan T. Marx, whose leading vision has centered artists and their work not only here on the University of Pennsylvania campus, but across the city of Philadelphia. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Good evening and welcome. I thought this was the 8th annual Distinguished Lecture, so who's counting, right? We have been blessed by a variety of talented artists over the years. Today's speaker is no exception. A very, very warm welcome to Elizabeth Turk. We will hear more about Elizabeth in the introduction shortly. Now, a word about the origins of the lecture series. Many years ago, as an undergraduate at Penn, majoring in political science and international relations, I was able to take several history of art courses. Fortunately for me, it was a magical experience and opened my eyes to a very new world around me. Since that time, art has had a profound impact on my life, not only for art appreciation, but the desire to create art. For many years, I have carved stone as a serious amateur and have received some modest recognition. So in giving back to the university, I had hoped to create a spark which would inspire today's students in all disciplines to develop an interest in and a passion for art, which has been so very important in my life. I'm thrilled that this year we're once again able to gather in person as well as on Zoom. I understand we have a wonderful turnout in person, of course, and remotely. A great number of you have been attending this lecture since its beginnings. Your interest and loyalty are very, very much appreciated, and I would like to welcome many new faces as well. And now I'd like to also thank Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw, Faculty Director of the Arthur Ross Gallery, Emily Zimmerman, Director of Exhibitions and Curatorial Affairs, and Miranda Powell, Arthur Ross Gallery Coordinator, for all their hard work in organizing this event. It is my pleasure now to hand the program over to Dr. Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw, who will introduce our speaker, Elizabeth Turk.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you, Emily. But thank you again, Susan. You know, without your vision and generosity, we wouldn't be able to have this lecture series, which has been such a wonderful contribution. It's such a pleasure to be able to bring a contemporary artist like Elizabeth Turk to campus, and with the kindness, generosity of her gallery, Herschel and Adler and Elizabeth Feld, to bring work by the artist to be with us in this space. So I encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity yet, to come up close to this work, which you'll see on the screen, but to experience it in person is really special. So take some time at the end and make sure to stay and join us for the reception. So a native Californian, I like this. I grew up in California, so it's always great to welcome a native Californian. Elizabeth Turk was born in Pasadena and raised across the Western states. She attended Scripps College in Claremont, California, and earned her MFA at the Reinhardt School of Sculpture at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. She is a recipient of numerous awards, including a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, a Barnett and Annalee Newman Foundation Fellowship, and a Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship. And I want to talk with her a little bit about these different fellowships and what they mean and how they impacted your work and the trajectory of your career. Turk is internationally recognized for transforming marble, wood, and other natural materials into unbelievably intricate, complex, and delicate objects. Her patient labor reveals drips, ripples, the inherent materiality of nature, and a technical virtuosity that recalls a mastery of form and matter akin to the work of 17th century Baroque sculptor Gian Lorenzo Bernini. I was really like immediately looking at her work. I thought, Bernini. I thought, the oh, I'll remember it later. What is the one, Andre? Where are you? The what is the Daphne, right? The Daphne where she's Apollo and Daphne where she's turning into a tree, right? And we have wood and human flesh and all of this together. I immediately think Bernini, and I also think of the 20th century modernist designer Isamu Noguchi for that kind of elegance. Recent projects push formal concerns into the realm of the existential, tackling the isolation of the pandemic and the ongoing natural destruction that has become emblematic of the Anthropocene. Tipping Point, for example, examines relationships between birds and humans, considering multiple perspectives from a bird's eye view of people gathered on a shoreline to creating three-dimensional manifestations of sound waves. It includes the Echoes of Extinction series, one of which we have here in the gallery with us, which visualizes the sonic loss of bird song that comes when our fine feathered friends lose their nesting territories to human incursion, global warming, and predation. Discussing her work in marble, Turk has said, quote, "Stone affords a timeless conversation. It will last longer than I will." Not tonight. You're here. You're here, and we have you for an hour-long conversation. So I really want to begin, and we have a wonderful presentation here, and we'll go through a number of projects together. But I want to begin with those two fellowships in particular, with the MacArthur and with the SARF, with the Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, because I think these are two really special fellowships, one of which, the MacArthur, the Genius Grant, has the power to really transform an artist's life. Brings a international recognition and kind of immediate attention. And the SARF, the Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, on the other hand, is a fellowship that kind of sends you deep into the archives and into the resources of a really wonderful research institution that is incredibly broad, from zoological resources to museological fine art things. So I was just hoping you would maybe start with thinking about and sharing with us the way that those two fellowships, which came on the heels of each other in 2010 and 2011, shifted your trajectory and have impacted your work.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. And thank you, Susan. This is really an honor for me to be here, especially in a city with so much sculpture. So on that note, a trajectory. I think the art world is brutal from whatever perspective where you enter is really through passion, and you're asked to expose that passion. And the more honestly you expose it, the more brutal it is on your soul in a way, because it opens you up to criticism. You know, it's just that exposure. And so when you get a call, like the call that you receive when you hear of the MacArthur grant, you don't really believe it's a MacArthur fellowship that's being offered to you. I think that for so many years you work in isolation. Artists choose a language of material because they want to speak on many layers, and usually they bring that to life in isolation. And so a call and recognition from people that you don't know in a broad area that you don't know, because MacArthur is known for, you know, all aspects of the humanities. And so it's not necessarily on your radar. It's shocking. In fact, the first words were, "I understand you're driving across the country. Could you pull over?" And I thought, what?
Safety first.
Safety first. Like,
First.
that is the strangest
No heart attack.
phone call. And you are likely not to pick up because it's not a number that you recognize. I don't know anybody in Chicago. And so you see this number and then you think, I really should answer this. And then that's your first instruction. So it even now I get chills. And I know that wasn't the direction of your question in a way, but it's sort of just the reveal is so surprising that it catapults you into an area that in some ways you might be ready for, in many ways that you're not. And for me, it was an internal award first because there was a sense of confidence that where I was going and ruminations perhaps had grounding in a larger arena. And for that, I'm forever grateful. And then I think what became a larger community is the biggest gift of all. Like, you are transported to a community of thought and shared ideas, which is exceptional. It's like being able to go to Penn again, you know, and ruminate outside your very guarded discipline. You know, so often we're trained to stay in the arts and go deep in art history or in the arts. You don't speak about the materiality of Mars, for instance, with actual scientists. And here you have that possibility. And that was an enormous gift and a change platform in that sense. It very intimately changed. So, and I could go on and on because it sent tentacles into so many different areas of my life. So oh, is that good? Is that better? Okay. Sorry, it's dropping down, kind of like the marble.
This mic really wants your bottom lip. It's very good.
Yeah, there you go. Is that good?
Yeah.
So I was just finishing up that I could go on at so many levels because MacArthur has changed every aspect of my life, but in those two probably foremost.
And the SARF and being at Smithsonian?
And SARF, oh God, the Smithsonian collection, for anybody who has a curious mind, you just are lost. Forever lost. You want to open up every door, speak to every person because their knowledge is so deep. And for me, I was just very interested in the material. I mean, marble I picked up because it was kind of an ironic found object. And all my stone has come from other projects. So the idea of going deep into the actual stone itself and learning more about the composition and being looking at it from a humanities point of view, like what is it composed of? All of the seashells and that, and the Smithsonian had everything. And then scientists to describe and answer every possible question. So it's a resource. I mean, it's our national resource, and I cannot underestimate the value of that.
Yeah.
So it was huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So going deep into the stone, the
Yes.
cages exhibition at Herschel and Adler is the first thing that we have up here. And expanding sculpture, the language of objects to the language of experiences. Can you speak on that?
I think art I love as a language itself because it's not linear. You can speak with an object and you can speak at the boundary of something. And I think for me, the cages was a metaphor. Marble is such a great material. It's also incredibly brutal and patient, but it has such a history that's very daunting, not only geologic, but obviously art historically. And so I liked pushing the edges of it so that I relied on the materiality for the aha moment. This piece that you can barely see up there is one line. It's basically a Mobius strip on steroids. So I can only speak of the weight of stone by making an object that's empty. So you can only feel it, or you feel it first before you think it. And it helped me dance on that edge of where we become something else, because I wanted to speak about emptiness by taking away all the physicality of something. So most people, when they first look at it, like this piece that's here, they don't realize that it's a rock. It's just a rock, or that it's a single line. So it's sort of a single line defining space, but when you dance on the edge of a boundary, I think it's really where humans live, because we're not always just what we seem to be. And I like to speak metaphorically. So that stone helped me do it. Anyway, is that?
Yeah, the text that is obscured there by the compression of the computer file reads, speaking in object, simultaneous paradoxical meaning, emptiness in solid, lightness in weight, infinite in momentary, contemporary in ancient, a line composing a cube, fluidity outlining mass, boundaries, the edge of becoming the opposite. So poetry too, yeah?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I think earlier today I put in Emily's hand the rock that was over here, and the first thing people do is like, oh, it's just you kind of push up because you're expecting something heavy, and so there's something about playing with expectations that I've liked the stone to but there's also just that art historical sense. Like, I'm from California. There's a marble statue on the corner is about as far away from what you think of when you think of, I mean, nobody in Southern California would ever have thought of something that you guys see here every day. So there was something very interesting about using a found object that had the weight, art historical weight in it, and then removing all of it and trying to use it as a different type of material, a different way to talk about art history. So the emptiness of it.
Yeah, and kind of extracting or revealing that emptiness.
Revealing the emptiness. Yeah.
So here you are in the studio. This looks like a posed picture, though. Is this one of those artist posed pictures? Because I imagine you in the studio with big, with cans on your ears to protect you, and the mask for dust.
Yes and no. It starts at the very end. It starts to be very, I mean, that just kills your neck, so I'm not very good at that, but there is also just the the filing and the finishing work, the focus of the finishing work. It is kind of great for mental health. You know, when you're really anxious and you just need, and it's like worry beads, you just need repetitive labor to kind of calm you down. So there's definitely a toggle between studio work that helps you realign your brain and, you know, more experiential things where you have to coexist with others. So
Do you work in silence or do you work with music? Or-
I would love to have worked more with music, but mostly in silence because the equipment is so loud. And so at the, you know, when you're working the long days, while ago, that you can see the larger tools, the grinders and everything is a drill.
Yeah, keep going.
Everything is a drill. Sorry. So it can be really loud and you just want silence. So in those, you know, those days I have the headphones on, you know, the gun actually made for shooting practice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's very silent.
Wow. So it
So-
just, it's, so within your head.
Within your head. Yes, you're
Completely.
definitely in your head. Yeah.
Written in stone.
Written in Stone is the recent show with Herschel and Adler. And again, I can't get away from that, the concept of extinctions and emptiness. And there's something that seemed so beautiful, but sadly beautiful, that they were no longer teaching cursive writing. And the idea of what that meant universally, and this kind of slow extinction that nobody was taking note of. It wasn't a vibrant explosion in the end. It just was not being taught. And I started to, in all the drawings for this, I started to collect old manuscripts and the thought of what was no longer approachable as an original document. And when you look at that language, I mean, the penmanship from the 1800s and the early 1900s is stunning. And I came across in research at the Met, actually, beautiful cross-writing drawings. And you saw some of those images on the earlier slideshow where people were being very careful with their paper. So they wrote first horizontally, then vertically, and at times diagonally. And it just created this very rich fabric. So I wanted to walk between the lines, basically. And I also wanted to put this idea of something very light and flighty, like cursive writing, into marble, you know, into the stone that was supposed to hold ideals. And so I wanted, but yet there's a fragility and power in memorializing something. And so I wanted to memorialize a line, a fragile cursive line. So these pieces are, again, a single line. And I use them as single scribbles, kind of intellectually, and then put them together. And again, in an earlier image, you saw them all connected into basically scribble line. Because if you can't read cursive, that's what you see. And whether it was whatever an ancient Arabic text or Chinese calligraphy, it again is a universal slow extinction.
Yeah, it's like a palimpsest, right? With these layers on top of each other, and when you pull them apart, you're able to extract them, you know, to get the code within.
Exactly. I mean, think of how we feel archaeologically when we decode just a few symbols. It leads to understanding a few passages. And then suddenly this entire perspective of the world is, you know, the doorway has been opened into this new idea.
And the gold?
The gold. First of all, I've always loved medieval scripts. I'm a big fan of Buddhism and kind of Shinto areas. And so when sculptures would break, everybody was asking me, you can't, what happens? What do you do? And I had this cabinet that I kept the pieces that were not perfect. And so whether it was my own pressure that created a crack or a not perfect space, I would put them into this closet. And eventually I pulled them all out and created written in stone. And so all of the gold is, it's kind of along the lines of the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, where you put the gold in the crack to make something stronger. And that, being of the West, and we always do things excessively, I put gold over a longer part of the passage. So that is the goal.
And gold has this eternal nature to it. I was just talking with one of the students about how all of the gold that's in the world will probably remain in the world. Nobody throws away gold, right? And that it gets melted down and reused, and the earrings that you're wearing might have been earrings for somebody else 1,000 years ago.
And I love the paradox of it. My family ended up in California because of the mines, and they were mine engineers. And so there's sort of a greed factor and an in the ground factor. And I love that we extract it to put it upon the objects that we hold as sacred. And so to me, there is a big part of it, and you can see on a later piece of just putting it back in earth and back inside. There's something really exciting about the material itself for humans. And, so it just seemed to be the right, it's a mineral. I'm lacing I'm actually dancing with minerals here, calcium and gold. So
it's beautiful.
now this is another one of the passages. Again, that was layered with the series. I think there are 21 or 22 pieces in this series. So,
And in deciding on the line and how it's going to sit in the space of the stone, what tools do you use to chart that out?
always grinders, dental tools, basically.
Oh, but
When you-
I mean,
yeah.
like, are you computer visualizing?
No, because it has to be more of a conversation.
Really?
And that was part of what was so wonderful about going to the Smithsonian, because you could go on the scanning electronic microscopes and see what would be an imperfection. Like in fact, that was one of the most exciting moments, because you could find the bubbles that were caught in the material. I mean,
You could see into it?
you can see into it, and marble is metamorphosed limestone. So if you think about it, if you find marble on any planet, it's us, it's humans. And there's a great way for me to approach that. I think that's part of why I like the mining engineer I inherited. I like going inside and just carving it out, but it becomes more of a conversation, because if you planned it, you couldn't move around an imperfection. You couldn't move around a fluid stream because you wouldn't have known it was there. So it's a very slow process with very, I talk too much with my hands, right? Can you still hear me? With very delicate tools.
So the stone then tells you what it's going to let you do.
Somewhat. It's kind of like meeting a person. If you go in with real heavy boots and this is how it's going to be, like that's the end. It will break everything. If you go in, kind of more, not really touchy-feely, but kind of touchy-feely, it will stay together. And then you can decipher where you need to maintain the connections. So.
Okay, tensions.
This is a very Buddhist series. The series is very self-reflective. I mean, stone, how are we approaching nature? How am I even approaching marble? And how have we dealt with it in the history of art, whether you're looking at the huge stone Buddhas or neoclassical visions, or, you know, every across the planet, or Egyptian iconic forms. There's something about that intention of putting your idea onto the earth. And so I wanted to intersect raw stones with that conversation, just the human intention with the beauty of what is. And so the pieces are generally, they grow around that concept, and the drawings grow around that concept as well. They're pen and ink, where the pen and ink just are kind of spontaneous. The India ink goes where it will. And then there's the crazy, I mean, this kind of carving is a little crazy. It's so intense. And so the drawing, the graphite was kind of approached in that same way to play in that space, and where I couldn't control everything. So
It's two different pairing of materials. And then this suspended.
this is the piece that we were speaking about just real briefly when we talked earlier this summer. This is my summer project after many years, but this is a new landscape project out at the Claremont Colleges in front of their new science building. And it's called Suspended Meditation, inspired by the Edgerton photographs of the first atomic bomb explosion. And so that moment when you actually saw the atmosphere or your air crack and break into these forms, I wanted to, or I was inspired to kind of bring that to limestone, kind of a historic scholar stone material, a little bit of that idea. So I carved out the interior, left the exterior of the limestone as it was, carved by a river, and then worked with a colleague from the MacArthur Fellow grant that I had met at one of the conferences, because he's an engineer, a really unique engineer, John Oschendorf at MIT. And so we came up with this idea to suspend from these three masts. And so this piece is centered over a black infinity pond. It's also centered along a hallway that's much like this, about 2 blocks long, and then a line of trees as you walk into the garden. So that the reflection, the stone, is all kind of one piece. Yeah, so, and the interior is gilded with gold, so the light then reflects the intensity of that opening of the earth. It's a little bit, you know, if you follow your curiosity, where where does it go, or what are we doing, or what is, you know, putting a piece like this right as you walk out of the science building is a little bit of a question, a little bit of a disruption.
Well, it's so, it has a kind of precarity.
There's a tension. There is definitely a tension, and the bearing had the most engineering in it. So it moves on the slightest breeze. You could just, and it will start spinning. And so there's something really, you want to touch it because you can't believe it's heavy. It's playing with that sense of mass, and the reflection itself is very pure. The black infinity pond is a perfect mirror for it. So it plays with that sense of reality as well.
And is the pond, is it water?
The pond is water.
Oh,
Yeah.
In this picture, it looks so still.
Right?
It
I
looks
know.
like glass.
It's amazing. Yeah, they did a beautiful job with the calibrating the surface
Mm,
of the
mhm.
pond. It's a black granite.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the poles that go up, those are aluminum?
The masts are stainless steel.
Stainless steel?
Yeah,
Masts.
yeah, with a very specific top because of the engineering. We engineered it to hold 2 football players because of
Are you
violent
to two footballers jump off?
insurance, the Miley Cyrus wrecking ball, sort of, I mean, push this in a direction. So, yeah.
Well, you know, that's thinking ahead, because I know at the Claremont colleges, you know, the students, they do move between different different
Yeah.
schools and take classes amongst. So
Yeah.
it's you know, it's such a beautiful piece, and you know, and thinking about that interior space being gilded,
Mhm.
and the kind of the eternal nature of these materials, but then also that kind of the temporal
Mhm.
aspect, because it does seem so ancient. You know, like you said, the stone has been worn away by water.
It's true. The stone was pulled from a river. So there's the top part of it. You can see the power of water just over thousands and thousands of years. And there was something really beautiful to highlight that carving, just the natural carving and the natural change, with kind of your own, I mean, put your own intention in a perspective, like the sand that it really is. And there's also, it's in California, and there is something about that idea of gold being in the interior, and maybe putting it back in the interior that I thought that it kind of conveyed as a larger notion.
Well, and that is
So-
so, I mean, gold is so attached to the California identity, the Golden State, right?
Mhm.
Everything around, I mean, growing up in California, you have the state education system that teaches you about the 49ers and the gold rush and Sutter's Mill. And I
Absolutely.
mean, I can recount all of that, and going to Sacramento on field trips to learn about the gold rush, and thinking about trying to encapsulate some of that legacy.
Yeah, it was important to me in a way. And plus, it was just beautiful to reflect, to be as a reflective material too. And plus, you know, there's Knott's Berry Farm where you can actually pan for gold,
Yes.
right? So
You can.
I think we all grow up with it.
Knott's is great.
in our
I love
blood.
Knott's. Oh my God. I've been there forever. Evaporated River.
So this is along that same vein. I was at the New York Public Library and was overwhelmed by all the maps from the 1700s that showed California an island, because the Colorado River was so big when French explorers crossed. And then when it even came from the side, there were some Russian maps that it was amazing to think of what that idea connotes. I mean, that the California would be that far away from the mainland means the Colorado River, when it flooded, was so powerful. And now we're battling over the last dribble, really. You know, it really is a rock garden in so many places. It's hard to imagine that in less than a century, we've harnessed it. And so that idea of these kind of massive rock gardens that shaped, again, the large piece in the center there is this beautiful piece shaped by a river. And then the blocks, the kind of, you know, construction of how humans somehow create these city grids or very recognizable forms. I liked having them crash all around in that sense. So that was a piece that we exhibited for the Meijer garden. And it was, I don't know, I liked that juxtaposition. So
Yeah, I mean, there's this very kind of the natural formation of the rock and the stone, and then these forms within it, which have a sense almost like chain link bundles to
it
me
is
that have, like
exactly.
landed that kind of that human intervention and trying to harness and captivate something that shouldn't be.
I like that. I mean, you'd always kind of wonder, why do we build cities, on a grid? We can think that way. We
And
can
you're
get
here in the
through.
Grid City, in the original Grid City.
There we go. But there is something recognizable that a human had touched that. And
Yeah.
I like that juxtaposition of it kind of brought out the beauty and the power of the water that's no longer there when you can't feel it, hear it, see it.
Shoreline Project.
Sure. And this goes back to the Smithsonian. So while learning about rocks, of course, there are shells that see me, those two departments are right next to each other, which for me was a happy accident. And so I began x-raying all these beautiful, seashells from across the globe. And you realize just how fragile that ecosystem of seashells really is. And so using those images, I originally looked for stronger patterns to carve, to kind of shape my carvings. And then it led me to a completely different idea. Like, why not try and imbue memories in families and kids and create more of an experience. If you're going to speak with objects, then why can't you expand upon that and just speak through memories, reshaping memories and kind of filling in the public space or reshaping ideas of the public forum. And so the Shoreline Project started, and we took those seashell x-rays and we put them on the tops of umbrellas, kind of a Dada moment, because who needs an umbrella in California? And for that guilt I had of taking away so many seashells as a kid, we brought 1,000 people back to the ocean and had an amazing, pop-up event. And it just lasted. We had a really cool drums could sort of drum the heartbeat of the ocean. And that was the signal to move. And it was amazing how people within 5 to 10 minutes, really 12 minutes, depending on age, pretty much, how people transformed into creative beings themselves. And so that was the beginning of Shoreline Project. So, you can see. And then we pivoted for the pandemic and we went to retirement homes and we created images of resilient organic forms. So each umbrella in all of these have stories. For the pandemic, the stories are about flowers that have some amazing story of survival, like the ginkgo and Hiroshima, like poppies in the World War I trenches. It kind of goes on. And but we use bright colors, and we had the most incredible day with a retirement home who this was pre-vaccination. So the strength of character and courage for everybody to get out with their matching mask and their umbrella and stay, like you couldn't bounce with your umbrella because then you would be too close. And so we choreographed the different parts of the retirement home. And some of them we even mapped out squares on the ground so they could dance in certain areas, but not go over their square. And we just created a beautiful, beautiful experiential sort of day. And then next day we came back to them. we created kaleidoscopes so that they were actually touching in the video. In a world that they couldn't touch, they crossed over. And at the end, it was so dramatic. It was probably one most powerful memories. If art is to give a memory or gift a memory, this one truly was a gift. So
I was reading an article about it. I think it was in the Los Angeles Times, and it ended with oh no, New York Times maybe. It ended with a quote from one of the participants who just like did not want to leave, did not want the day to end, and had felt that it was, an opportunity to connect and to, to connect through a shared activity that was so, a shared experience that had been so absent during the pandemic. And I think so many of us, have purposely forgotten. Right?
yeah,
Purposely,
absolutely.
so much
Yeah.
of that loneliness and not being a
Yeah.
part of things and participating, and to
Yeah.
do so as part of a project outside in a beautiful space with, in a choreographed way must have been incredibly impactful.
We came up with a mantra that joy is an act of defiance. And it really resonated because it made you think about what it took to not think about your fear. And I think for everybody who participated in this original Look Up project, they were probably ages 65 to 105. And I mean, we went to the all different parts of the retirement home, and that mantra just really resonated. I mean, I had tears in my eyes watching people just dance, forget themselves and dance. And we created different ways for different mechanical assists to actually hold an umbrella. So that part was fun too. So if you're in a wheelchair, or if you're in, you could still, a scooter or whatever, you could still hold an umbrella and be a part of the drone footage. Yeah. So I think in the earlier slide things, you saw a huge kaleidoscope, and that was when we brought everybody out to their parking lot. And it was a triumphant moment. It was true. People didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can imagine this was the fall of 2020. So we're still, if you left, you had fear. And it was amazing for them to drop that fear and realize just how powerful. It's like, I believe in creativity. You ladder ideas and without getting into your corner. You are free. You feel free. So
a
we saw
gift.
it.
Yeah,
It is a gift.
Yeah. Echoes of Extinction.
These are, earlier I was speaking with Susan, these are some of my favorite drawings. After the Getty fire, we all in California feel the crack in our air and the intensity of the dryness every year. And at the point of the Getty fire, I don't know, I was compelled to go pick up all of that ash, as much ash as I could in these bags. And I started doing these drawings. So these drawings, the air we breathe, it's the name of the drawing series, but they are part of Tipping Point Echoes of Extinction, which are the sound of the birds. And it was so silent. Like I wanted the material that I worked with to convey the silence that was that shouldn't be there. I mean, when you walk into an area that's just ash, it's so different. And you realize that your memory is now no longer possible. So these are the sounds that I was listening to for the body of sculptures that I was creating at that time, but was hoping to just bring attention to the traces that we make, the impact that we have all the time. When we leave a room, there's still the sense of what was. And we see it historically, but that's under the lens of somebody else. And I think, or the spotlight that somebody might give to a certain subject. And somehow this emptiness pervaded. And I wanted to speak to that in the material that was. So the material of the drawings actually has all the remnants of what was in it because it's that
From that
ash.
ash.
So anyway, again, like
Yeah.
I think too much in layers and it's probably too subtle. So, but it was the beginning of those thoughts.
Wow. And Echoes of Extinction at the Eamon Carter.
This is the body of work that started at Herschel and Adler. We opened during the pandemic. And so it was kind of interesting that it opened to no one. There was nobody to go to the opening. And so but we decided to do that regardless because it was a beautiful storyline. It was a beautiful part of the story. And then it became a traveling show, ending at the Eamon Carter just last week. I think I got these back. So these birds grew, or these sound columns, Echoes of Extinction, grew from conversations and the advice of ornithologists at the Cornell, the Macaulay Lab of Ornithology at Cornell, and where they have been recording bird sounds for 100 years or so. And so some of those, like the passenger pigeon, have gone extinct in the meantime. So these are a combination of those, but since that can get so dark, I brought it back to endangered birds so that there's still a conversation of
There's still
what's
possibility.
possibility. Yeah, but there's also this recognition of what's happened, you know, because we remember in a timeline that's like this, you know, and you read the stories of passenger pigeons flying in flocks so huge that the skies would darken for days. Like if that happened now, I would be so terrified. I could only think of the birds, the movie of the birds, you know, and run inside. But that was what life was. And that idea that memory is already lost was something that we wanted to speak to. And a totemic form is life. You know, like Kandinsky, it's life. So I wanted to bring that sound vertical and make it come alive. So on each of the sculptures is a QR code that takes you to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is cool.
Yeah, I just love visualizing the bird song itself. You know, we really are now in a kind of silent spring, right? That Rachel Carson predicted, where, you know, I remember growing up as a kid and getting in my mom's VW van and going for a drive, and the windshield would be covered with dead insects. And now, you know, you never wash your windshield because nothing dies on it anymore. But
It's so true.
you know, this, you know, and we've lost so many birds.
Part of the record, they realized that Doppler radar that started in the 70s was recording migrations. And although it took further development of technology today for that, they still had all of that Doppler radar from weather reports in the 70s. And they've gone back to reevaluate it and map those migrations. And that's how we're coming up with the statistics that we've lost a third of our bird population from the 70s alone. So each of these sculptures is kind of connected to an Audubon print because it kind of bookends, you know, that's his vision or view of going out into the world, the West or this US, and recording all of the bird life that he saw, much of which is gone. I tend to look for his prints and find if that bird still exists. And it kind of has a storyline then. And what's interesting, a lot of areas feel that those birds have gone away. but they realize they never had them. And but there's an Audubon print recording it, which is kind of interesting to the length of our memory and
Yeah.
how much impact we've had without realizing.
Yeah. Well, and
So-
that artists can make on, on that history, right? For Audubon to be going out and making these images of birds, he had to kill those birds and stuff them to get them to sit still,
It's true.
right? And then for you to make these pieces which visualize the sound waves from their bird song that may only be heard in the future through recordings.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
poignant. I
But
think-
not, yeah, but this is not to get too dark on all of this. When we did this opening, the first one was on Catalina Island. We tried to bring families to the opening and do a lot of outreach to bring non-artists and non-art world people into an interaction. And we handed everybody LED candles, which again is like a dark symbol. But then with sound, we asked them to just write what they would miss the most. And this was the summer, 2019, I think that summer. And then we recorded in long exposed camera shots. And we wanted to have, or my vision was to hope that realization of how long your trace was, how long and how many people intersected your movement and your action, and try and kind of refine that concept. But I thought it was really beautiful how they all rode at a similar height, at a similar space, and they created this really magnificent canopy without with spontaneity, without prompting. So it was the first. We have to refine that concept, but again, a merging of the object language and the experience language.
It's beautiful.
So
Okay, so I think we have time for some questions. There's one or two questions. Okay.
I don't know.
Here, I've been sitting now, it'll take me a second.
Well, the microphone's working anyway. That's good. No, as far as you said the found objects, the marble, was it from, salvaged buildings? Where is the marble actually coming from?
Each body of work has a different origination. Originally, my Wing series that made me start thinking that way came from the memorials around Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial and Iwo Jima, and it had been damaged, or it was considered cracked, and so it had been taken to this dumping area, and there were these huge blocks just left over from that construction. And I stumbled upon them because I was working in DC at that time. It was a crazy story, but I thought, wow, really throwing away marble? This is supposed to hold justice. I kind of like that storyline. There was a beautiful layer in that. So that was the beginning of it. And then when I moved to California, my studio is inside a working marble yard, and I was shocked at how much stone was getting pumped out and for renovated perfect kitchens and everything. And so I started to use the stone that was abandoned there. There's so each body of work has a beginning, middle, and end. And the Getty did a renovation. And so all of those bases, those solid Carrara stone bases, were exchanged for a more earthquake sensitive structure. And I thought, oh my God, this is incredible story. So the script story is created all out of the Getty bases. And I've left like a mark, a rust mark or a bronze mark or something of where the the head was attached, because it is, again, a found object. So it's a more fragile marble in a sense, but it has this nuanced, very nuanced approach to it. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I've read a text on weaving a basket, and in this text, the author challenged the notion that the idea precedes the form. So you'd have an artist or a craftsman that has the idea of the object, and then they would make the object. And then he proposed that the form is also shaped during the process, and the material also constructs the form. So I would like to know, in your work, how do you navigate among these three aspects of idea, form, and material? Because I saw the marble, and it does exactly what we do not expect what was supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that quote. It's really beautiful. Because I think, I mean, this is a very slow process, so you can think so much. So I always carve with a pad of paper, or another rock, or my pants. And I think that because you can delude yourself in your intellectualism, especially when you're working with a material as hard as stone. So most of these pieces are driven by an intellectual challenge, and then there becomes the physical challenge. So if you think of a lattice, they're created with links. All of these are created with links so that they won't fall apart in and on themselves, because that to me was kind of an intellectual question, like what architecture can self-support. And that, if you go even further, what are self-supporting systems, whether those are political systems or architectural systems, especially when you start to remove and edit on any serious level, does meaning get lost? Because, what are those patterns, and is there a consistency to those patterns? Because they're all dealing with gravity. And so I realized that if I brought the material to within bounds of a connection, then I could decide at some point, like up, down, which connections would actually hold. And there's always more space than what you think. And then that way it's the material talking back to you. Very much so. I was like, no, I can't move that much further, and there stays a connection. So you can see in a piece like that, if you follow it with your eye, you can see where it can self-support, and where the timing was to make it a vertical piece, say, because it would, if you put it upside down, you put it on its side, it won't self-support for very long. So there's definitely that conversation with the powers that guide our life that we don't see and don't even think about. And I wanted to bring attention to that, gravity being one of the biggest. So, I mean, it's got to be managing your thoughts in a lot of ways too, right? So it was a way to speak to that without having it be you and me. It's all in that third object, if that makes sense.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. This has been just wonderful. And I have admired very much how careful you are about attaching meanings to your sculpture, right? And the way you have talked about the subtlety of those references and how you want them to be subtle and how you almost demand them to be subtle, and that the darkness is the fear that you want to keep at bay. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that line, right? How one tests a meaning for its subtlety, right? At what point does meaning become too much, too heavy, too dark? And have there maybe been moments where you've encountered a stone or a piece of marble that for you came with too much baggage, right? That where you were like, oh, the story is going to overpower the forms. So I'm just wondering whether you can talk a little bit more about what you mean by subtlety, if there are moments when you have rejected something because it was unsubtle to you, and what that might have looked like or meant.
I like that question. It's very complex, right? I think, yeah, absolutely, all the time, because I want very much to dance on that line of a boundary. And I mean, truly, a darkness was the motivation, I think, for that shoreline to bring, you know, that was definitely dancing on that edge, because it was because it was a political moment, and it was the idea of creating a public event in a public space where people acted before they spoke, and kind of to address community health, community mental health, through art, through creativity. And that seemed very dark and I didn't want to put a name on it, but that was definitely an intellectual pursuit behind the kind of the plan or the platform that we were trying to create, without speaking and without directing. So I think when I saw police coming, and like to the event, it seemed like, oh no, there was going to be a moment of something else shaping, not just the ocean that would shape the forms that were, you know, on this beach. So there's a context that was already starting to shape something that was supposed to be completely spontaneous. And it did remain completely spontaneous. Nobody saw that other, you know, the things that I could see from the top of the hotel, which was kind of, there was sort of that line. And then I think as far as the stonework goes, there have been pieces that that I guess I kind of gravitate towards them. There was a bank building from Texas that was all marble, and it had really great blocks. And I love that this was the beginning of the cages. I love the idea of carving emptiness out of, and this was coming during the recession that I was working on that body of work, like creating empty marble blocks out of a bank door. There is something very, I don't know, that seemed to be where we were. And it made sense with that material had that history in it. And that, I never talk about that one. I guess that one in some ways, I mean, it's so nuanced that you would never get it unless you had read the history. Whereas on the script pieces, you can see the marks still in it. I've never carved anything that had that had bullet marks or that kind of mark in it. At least not yet. I haven't been given that opportunity.
The subtle question is wonderful, and it made me, the unsubtle part made me think of the story of the QR codes and how they started. Do you want to at the Catalina Museum when they actually played? It wasn't QR codes.
When we first started using the QR codes, it was before the pandemic, so nobody had really used them before. And we had used both motion sensor sensitive recordings, right? So you walked by and you heard the bird sound, but people, they were just echoing all the time, and they were driving all the curators crazy. And so they asked just to put the QR code, but very few people knew how to or would use them. And it was sort of an interesting, we were trying to bring sound, but yet these are about extinct sounds. So there was sort of an interesting conversation about whether or not to bring, I don't know if that was the exact story that you were talking about, but there was an interesting way to introduce, I don't know, what's ethereal to something that's very, very tangible, or making the visual permanent. I don't know.
Where exactly on the coast of California was that photo taken that showed from above the, I mean, I
Laguna
don't
Beach.
think it was Santa Monica, was it?
No, it was Laguna Beach.
Laguna, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I love Laguna Beach. That's very nice. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, but I really want to thank you, Elizabeth. This has
Thank
been
you, Gwendolyn and Susan. Thank you. So, yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
all
much.
of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everybody, please join us. We have a reception in the lobby. Hopefully it's cooled down a little bit out there. It's not so hot. So please join us for some wine and some coffee, cookies, and please take a look at the work close up. We'll turn the lights all the way up so you can see it well.